Ready?
Hit it!
Hello everyone and welcome to Twice Nightly the podcast with Maria Lovelady
And Michael Alan-Bailey, a podcast that aims to bring everything variety out of the wings and into the limelight.
So what are we waiting for?
Let's raise the curtain
And start the show! Coming up on today's show, we talk to Helen Lannaghan and Joseph Seelig OBE, the festival directors of the London International Mime Festival.
We hear all about Michael's Oodie.
And find out why Maria had to feign embarrassment at an unplanned round of applause. Welcome back, everybody. It's lovely to have you with us again. Well, this is normally the time where we would talk about what we've been doing, what we've been up to. We'd catch up with ourselves, but there's been absolutely no need because we've been together pretty much all of the time.
We have, since we last recorded. We have been rehearsing, we've been performing, we've been out podcasting, we've been doing, well, I'd say pretty much everything together, but that might raise a few eyebrows.
I'm actually sick of you. Never.
So we've been performing this week at the Royal Court Theatre in Liverpool, and we were actually in a variety show. This is the first time we've actually performed ourselves in a variety show as part of a variety bill.
It was amazing, wasn't it? It was absolutely incredible. And it was funny because we were performing as ourselves, but also in character, because we were there really to promote our show, Twice Nightly, the show, not the podcast.
So we did some different numbers from our show, but as Mike said, we had some patter with the audience. And for half of it, we were doing it in our characters from the show, Don and Madge. And the other half of the show, we were doing it as Maria and Mike. So negotiating that was quite tricky, wasn't it, in rehearsal and in the performance? But obviously Mike, who is a comic and has played comic for, what, a decade now you've been doing comic.
Something like that, yeah.
You just slipped into it and you were so confident and you just knew that we'd be able to handle it. I've never done anything like that before, so I was terrified beforehand. And we asked Sam Avery, who we've got on the podcast next week, who is a brilliant stand-up comedian, for some tips. So you can listen to that next week and get those tips if you are interested. And it did help me, actually. I have to say that Sam's advice did help me. Your advice helped me, but it was still terrifying.
But you were flying. Like I said to you at the time, there was a point during our patter with the audience where you were speaking and I thought, oh, I'll jump in now to sort of give her a hand. But then I looked at you and I thought, I don't need to. You were literally in the audience faces. You were getting them riled up. And I thought, no, she's fine. She's got this.
I think I was very safe because I knew that you had me and I knew that you could take over and do the whole thing and that it actually didn't matter if I spoke or not. But at the same time, it's really hard to not get on like my feminist high horse and be like, no, he shouldn't be the man that just speaks. And that isn't the reason. The reason that you're speaking isn't because you're a man. It's because you're way more experienced than me. But I was like, I don't want it to come across, because if you're listening and if you haven't seen the pictures, I mean, go onto our Instagram and see them. I was dressed like as a showgirl, and when I came out, there was like lots of wolf whistles, and it was all very like, ooh. So it would have been very easy for that to have been my role, but of course it's me, and I'm not happy with that. I'm like, no, I must be funny too.
No, and you were, and it absolutely wasn't your role. You were completely in control of your character when you were being Madge, and you were completely in control of all of your bits when you were being you. Have you been bitten by the bug of interacting with the audience more as yourself than as a character? Even though we did it as both, didn't we? We did some patter in character and then some patter as ourselves.
I was definitely much better doing the patter as Madge than I was doing it as Maria. At least it felt more comfortable. I don't know how that came across to you or to the audience.
Well, it will have felt more comfortable to you, but I feel like that's only because all of that patter that was in character was scripted.
Yes,
so I feel like automatically it would feel more comfortable. I mean, really, it probably felt more comfortable to me as well because I knew what I had to say and when I had to say it. But I don't know. There's an adrenaline when you do it as yourself.
Oh, yeah.
It's unscripted, isn't there?
Yeah, there was an adrenaline, is right. And just like catching your eye and both looking at each other thinking, what the hell are we going to do next?
Which is what we do 90% of our time together anyway.
But I did enjoy it. And I do think I could do it again. Like, it hasn't put me off.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm looking forward to doing our show and holding on to my script. Even though we wrote it, it's like, I know what's happening next.
So we were there at the Royal Court to promote our show Twice Nightly, which is going out from April onwards, and it's going to be going to loads and loads of venues throughout the UK, all throughout the year. Keep an eye on our social media for news about where it's going and when it's going on. Tickets are on sale now at various venues, and we are very, very excited because, can we reveal?
Depends what you want to reveal, Mike. This is a podcast, so people can't see what you want to reveal.
Well, we've just had somebody come on board to be part of the show. So in our show, people might remember from when we talked about it in the past, there is a voiceover role. So we have a character in the show who is a judge, and we only ever hear their voice. And we've just had someone very, very special agree to come on board and be the voice of the judge for us. And not only that, but they've also agreed to be a guest on the podcast in the coming weeks.
Should we still keep it as a secret?
Okay, well, let's just say this then. The person that we have doing our voice and being an upcoming guest is one of the most recognizable voices in the country, if not the world. If you want to take a guess, get in touch with us and tell us who you think it might be. Like the epitome of iconic, distinguishable, instantly recognizable voice.
Because that was the casting breakdown, wasn't it? We were like, who can we have? Because as you probably know, a lot of you, Mike is extremely good at impressions. So we probably could have had like Tom Hanks come and do the podcast if we wanted Mike to be doing an impression. But we needed somebody that had a really distinctive voice, and we've definitely got it. And a link to variety, which always helps.
Tom Hanks. I don't know why you picked Tom Hanks.
I don't know. I just feel like
Tom Hanks is probably someone that I really can't do. I'm not even going to try because I just embarrass myself. Tom Hanks.
And would have made absolutely no sense why Tom Hanks was hanging around in Liverpool in the 1930s. But if, Tom, you're listening, we would love to have you and we'll write you a different role.
Yeah, come on, Tom. It was just lovely, wasn't it, to dust off the costumes and get back into character and to sing the old songs from the show and just really refamiliarize ourselves with that world.
It was like we were robots, wasn't it? Because we haven't done Twice Nightly for like a year and a half now, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And we put the music on and all of a sudden we started singing and dancing and harmonizing and everything. And it just came out automatically. Obviously, it needed a bit of polishing, but it's amazing that we did it so much, didn't we? We were so rehearsed that I don't know. I think we're going to be in our graves doing that little scene stealers routine.
No, well, that's it. Because at the time when we first did it, it was so drilled into us, wasn't it? That it really was muscle memory just coming back to us. Because we put the music on, didn't we? We both looked at each other and said, I haven't practiced this. I haven't gone through this. I can't remember the words. Let's just put the music on and see what we remember. And we did the whole number.
Yeah.
Choreography and all. Congratulations, us.
Congratulations. And we did it and it went down well. So if you were at the Royal Court Theatre in Liverpool for the Lunchtime Variety Club, thank you for coming out and supporting us. And it was lovely to meet you and to see you. We met a few lovely faces in the audience, didn't we, after the show, which was really nice. Thank you for tuning in and listening.
It's not the only theatrical experience we've had this week. Tell us about your theatrical experience, which I'm hoping in the coming weeks is also going to be my theatrical experience.
This episode, we are covering the 47th London International Mime Festival, which is running at various venues around London from Monday, the 16th of January to Sunday, the 5th of February. And last week, as you know, we were lucky enough to go to the rehearsals and speak to Paul Hunter, who is the artistic director of Told by an Idiot, who is directing Charlie and Stan at Wilton's Music Hall as part of the festival. And I went to see it on Friday night and it was absolutely magical.
I am so jealous. The show is touring, so I'm going to try and get to see it when it goes to Derby. It's going to the Derby Theatre at the end of February, so I'm definitely going to go and try and catch it then. But I'm green with envy that you got to see it and I wasn't there.
It's basically a silent movie on stage, so in that respect, it fits perfectly into the Mime Festival. But you did feel like you were watching a 3D silent movie. 4 actors, 2 of whom are musicians. The other 2 are playing Stan Laurel and Charlie Chaplin. And the physical energy that was filling the room and the comedy and the heart, it was just beautiful. And the The place was sold out, so there was just such a buzz in the room anyway. Wilton's Music Hall is the perfect location for this show. And the 4 actors just really brought this world to life. To hold an audience like that, and we'll talk about this more in the interview with Helen and Joseph, but to hold an audience like that it was about 90 minutes without a single word being used on stage. They got people up from the audience. I was one of them. I ended up getting up, and I won't say too much about it in case people are listening.
Oh, I bet you hated every minute.
I had to kind of feign embarrassment because actually I just wanted to get up and stay there.
Oh, me. Don't choose me.
But they ended up making me play the piano, which I can't play. The lady just got my 2 fingers and told me which keys to press, and I accompanied a scene, and then I ended up having to take my own little bow, which was quite nice at the end. And but I was
again, I'm sure you hated that.
Well, it was really nerve-wracking because the music throughout the whole show is just exquisite. Like, you can't believe that you're hearing it live. The fact that they've even bothered to do it live, because really they could have just done it to a soundtrack. Absolutely stunning. Yeah. So then to just have me like doing my little that sounds like Jaws, probably is what I made it sound like, death. And yeah, it was just really amazing to be part of the show, and just a gorgeous cast. So afterwards, they had a talk as well with Joseph, who you're going to hear today, with Paul. Toby Jones was there, an array of other people, and we got to sit and listen to them and talk all about why movement is so important in theatre.
So that is one of the shows that is part of this year's International Mime Festival. And in our interview with Helen and Joseph, they're going to tell us loads more about some of the other amazing productions that they've got coming up in this smorgasbord of theatrical magic. There's a word we've never used on the podcast before.
I think we should.
Did I pronounce it right?
Is it smorgasbord?
What did I say?
Borg, like beyond Borg.
Did I? I think it is smorgasbord, isn't it? Oh, I got so excited by the use of a new word that I didn't even think about whether I was pronouncing it properly.
What made me laugh was next week you'll hear in Sam Avery's podcast, he said, now I don't want to get grandiose. And I thought, that's all we want to get, Sam. That's all we want to get. So you get as grandiose as you want.
Helen came all the way from Brighton to speak to us, and we met at the CAA, which is in Covent Garden, and we had a lovely, wonderfully English afternoon, didn't we? Sipping tea in Covent Garden, talking about theatre. We had a lovely chat, and we were talking about all things variety. We were talking about all things theatre and music. We were talking about variety performers. You were talking about one of our previous guests, Jack Pallister and Jordan Langford,
who I saw on stage at the CAA playing the spoons.
And Helen was talking about somebody that she'd seen, the husband of someone that she knew who used to play the saw, like a tool, the saw, used to play it.
I know she described it, but I still don't get it.
No, I don't. I think it's definitely one of those things you'd have to see.
See to be believed.
We'd have to saw it to see it.
Oh,
to see it,
God.
to saw it.
We're here all week, ladies and gentlemen.
Shall we get Joseph and Helen on to tell us more about the amazing London International Mime Festival?
Here they are, Helen Lannaghan and Joseph Seelig.
OBE.
OBE. So we are sat here in the CAA with Helen Lannaghan and Joseph Seelig, OBE.
Joseph, you're our first OBE.
I guess it was my number came up in the lottery, and I was very pleased.
It was your time.
It was my time is yet to come. It just happened at that time. So yeah, I was very fortunate. Felt very honoured. In fact, I was honoured.
Well, we're very happy to have you. You've brought a bit of class to the proceedings. As I'm sure we all will.
Yes, we'll do our best, won't we?
So I guess the first thing I'd like to ask is that everyone that I've talked to about speaking to you guys is a real comedian and comes out with the classic thing of, you're interviewing people about mime.
Yeah, mime on the radio.
Not going to get much out of them.
Yeah.
Classic, everyone's a comedian. Yeah. So, I know that you guys have said in the past that there's a big misconception about what mime is and what you guys do. Why do you think that people have that misconception, and what would you like to kind of squash about all of those misconceptions that people have?
Well, that's a very sort of simple question to which the answer is bound to be complicated. In one way, of course, the public isn't wrong. If you say mime, everybody thinks of Marcel Marceau, silent. if you say music, people can think of more than one person, or literature, they don't all just say Agatha Christie, but mime, silence. So in a way, the public isn't wrong. We've got a historic title, because when the festival started in 1977, and it was the idea of a friend of mine who was a mime clown, it was basically all silent. Now that only lasted for the first year, until the festival became much more varied, but we never changed the title because people kept coming. It wasn't broke, so why fix it? But it has been for the last 47 years, not a source of embarrassment, but we always have to explain it. But why people have a prejudice about mime, that I can't explain. In all fairness, one should say, even though there isn't any Marcel Marceau type mime in the festival, and hasn't been for years and years and years, he was a great artist. I don't see why there's a big prejudice about him. When he died, which was some years ago, it was on the front page of every newspaper in the world, or not that I read every newspaper in the world, it was on the front page of every newspaper I read. He was a very important person, so why he was the subject of ridicule, I've no idea. And he was a hero too.
He was, but I suppose that white face, the stripy t-shirt, the hat and the flower, the bip clown, was very easy to emulate. So you would see a lot of people doing that in the streets. Kenny Everett famously did it in his sketch show. So I think it was just a very easy takeoff. But why it was that, some people go so far as they hate mimes, they make horrible jokes about mimes.
Well, we're kind of used to this now, aren't we?
We are.
Once upon a time, lots of reviews for our shows would start by the critics saying, I hate mime, but...
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed the shows. Anyway, there it is. So we haven't changed the title.
Yeah,
we're
exactly.
not going to change the title.
No, we're certainly not going to change the title. Absolutely not. But I think a lot of people, they quite enjoy the fact that it's got a bit of a cult following. So most of the shows are sold out, and I had to help at a first aid incident after a show, and someone came out from the audience to help with the person who had fainted, and they got talking to someone else, and this woman was saying, I've never heard of the Mime Festival. I like to think of myself as a cultured person, and I know all about the theatre scene, but I've never heard of this festival. And this other audience member said, but that's why we really love it, because it's a bit of a secret, it's a bit of an in thing, you have to be in the know to know about it, and we love it for that. So we do fly under the radar, don't we?
Why did the person faint? That wasn't a result of what they perceived.
It was so incredible what they saw, they just couldn't take it.
But you say that it has a cult following.
Yeah.
But the festival, it's in its 47th year.
Yeah.
It seems, from my knowledge, it gets bigger every year. And some of these venues that you are in, especially this year, the Barbican, Jackson's Lane, you're at LAMDA, Wilton's, these are not cult venues.
No.
These are some of the biggest venues in London.
Yeah.
So how has the festival grown from its beginnings to this festival that's took over London for the time you're here?
Well, it started off in one little theatre, the Cockpit Theatre, and in the next 2 years, I think, it spread to various other small theatres. And then we got into the South Bank Centre, and that increased, it raised our profile enormously. So although the work might have a cult following, if you're at the South Bank or somewhere, it's a destination, and loads of people go. They don't necessarily know what they're going to see, but what's on at the Queen Elizabeth Hall, that sounds interesting. So we have quite a big following, and places like the Barbican, these aren't fringe theatres, these are very big, important theatres, Sadler's Wells, and it's done us the world of good. It's not just done us good, it's done the public good, because they've seen fantastic shows in these places that they really probably otherwise, if it was on in some smaller theatre, they probably wouldn't bother to go. They go because they trust the theatre as well as us.
They do, but we also have to applaud, don't we, the people who've grown with us. So because we've been going 47 years, people in the profession who were with us in those early years, they've also developed their careers. So Alistair Spalding, who's now Sir Alistair Spalding and runs Sadler's Wells, we knew him a very long time ago when he was running a mime festival in Crawley. And his career has grown through the festival's development as well, which is why we're at Sadler's Wells. And Tony Racklin at the Barbican used to work at the Roundhouse, didn't she? And she has also, developed her career. So, it's thanks to people like that who take us with them as they grow their careers.
But I suppose for them it's also a risk in a way, because there are no household names in the world in which we work. There just aren't any. So theatres are taking a risk in the sense that they're offering something to the public which they won't know about. So it's, I suppose if you go to the Barbican or somewhere, the tickets aren't particularly cheap. People have really got to trust the venue as well as the festival, and they're taking a risk. Of course, it's not really a risk, because as we know, the shows are all wonderful, aren't they?
Absolutely wonderful, yeah. And that's the thing, is people come because they say they want to see something different. So, we're offering sort of theatre that gives you an experience rather than just, the well-made play. This is something that will make you feel something, and that you will remember it afterwards.
But also, what we're offering are not experimental art forms from outer space. We're offering circus theatre that isn't quite circus. We're offering dance that isn't quite what you expect. It's sort of extreme dance. We're offering all sorts of exciting forms of theatre, but that are just a bit offbeat, and they're the work of, I think, amazing creators, very innovative people.
Absolutely.
We're very lucky, aren't we, to work with artists.
We
It's
are.
what makes it all worthwhile.
Yeah,
They're special people.
We sometimes describe it as theatrical waifs and strays, which seems to fit the bill, doesn't it, really?
Yeah.
Because they're not quite any particular category, if you need to categorise them at all. But we love to live on that edge where things are just not quite one thing or another, but they are visual theatre, so that it's work that is not driven by a spoken or text-based narrative. That's the important thing.
And actually, that goes right back to sort of the origins of theatre, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
The actual people were waifs and strays, and people that didn't fit into one particular box or category. So it's actually very traditional in that sense, then, I guess.
No, that's absolutely correct. But I think they were waifs and strays because that's how society treated them. They were rogues and vagabonds, really. And theatre was licensed, wasn't it? Only certain theatres could exist. Drury Lane was one, and Covent Garden was another. But all the other places in London.
Well, you couldn't do spoken theatre because you were not permitted to speak, which of course is a great breeding ground for mime and slapstick comedy. And certainly in terms of some of the work that we used to bring to the earlier festivals, when it was still, the Eastern Europe was still politically more a tricky place, certain companies would use puppets or mime theatre to talk about bigger political ideas, because they couldn't really be arrested because they weren't saying anything. They couldn't be censored, except of course they did sometimes get thrown into prison, and we would sometimes not know whether a company was from Czechoslovakia, for instance, as it was then, would actually make it because they were often imprisoned.
I wonder if you both could articulate for me, because I totally understand this, but I don't think I could articulate it very well. I saw an interview with you guys where you said you like to help the people that aren't mainstream get to the point where they are mainstream, and then you move on to somebody else. So what is it about the not being mainstream that piques your interest more than something becoming mainstream? Because I think a lot of people wouldn't understand why you would want to sort of get off the bus once something hits that mainstream thing, whereas I do understand it. It's like TV shows. If the TV show is mainstream, I'm not interested, I don't want to watch it. So why do you think that when it's more obscure, that's more attractive to you?
Well, I don't think it's because it's more obscure. I think you've explained why you like it very well, probably better than I'm about to. But this is nothing against mainstream theatre. Once upon a time, I was an unsuccessful actor. I sort of know what mainstream theatre is, but it's something else. And I just find the artists and creators that we work with, I find their thought processes, the way they think about issues, and the way they want to stage their work. I just find it exciting. And it's not really alternative, it's not this, that and the other. It usually at the beginning doesn't have the money. So, often you find people, they direct their own, they create their own work, they direct it, they make the costumes, they do everything, and somehow, it doesn't just make them exhausted, but it makes them exciting. And I find, the work that we see at its best simply wonderful and unique. And we also see lots of work that's absolute rubbish too.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we probably see about 350 shows a year in order to come up with 16.
Yeah, so that's it's not necessarily that our audience knows that, but in order for them to see what they're seeing, we've seen perhaps 150 shows that we didn't want. But that's what a programmer's job is.
And in terms of what you're doing, this cult work, have you seen over the years the mainstream industries be influenced by this work, even if they don't pay credit to it? Because as you just said before, a lot of the mime came out of a place of restriction and finding ways to bend the rules. And once that's kind of allowed, as mainstream media allows a lot more than it used to, have you seen that filter through a little bit more?
Well, absolutely. I mean, British theatre is much more physical than it used to be. If you go to a drama school now, you don't just learn how to speak verse, but you learn all sorts of physical skills. And you think of something like at the National Theatre, One Man, Two Governors, which was basically an English commedia it is a famous commedia dell'arte story, which was brilliantly adapted for an English sort of setting, in which I think it was James Corden, wasn't it? But, proved an absolute master of physical comedy. Another really good example of how, I suppose, fringe theatre elements influence mainstream theatre. Warhorse, one of the biggest hits the National Theatre's had in years. Nobody comes out thinking about, I can't remember the names of any of the characters. They come out and the person they remember is the horse. The horse is basically 12 puppeteers inside this thing. And there it is, all over the West End. And I don't know, I can mention various, if I could remember the names, but Avenue Q and all this sort of thing.
Life of Pi is on right now. They all won the Olivier.
My Neighbour Totoro is just finishing its run at the Barbican.
So, that's it, isn't it? I mean, the West End is no longer just a series of well-made plays, and the public has a great appetite for unusual experiences.
I think we'd also say that we see adverts on commercial adverts. You just think, oh, that's a really interesting thing, and that's pretty much what we just had in one of our shows. And I think that there are a lot of people in the commercial side of advertising who come and see what we do because they know it'll be a bit quirky, a bit interesting, a bit different, and that's what they're looking for.
Compare the market. I mustn't advertise for them. But the meerkat's a puppet, and he was created by a puppeteer, and there you go. It's one of the most successful television adverts ever.
Yeah. Well, Gandini Juggling did a lot for a certain Swedish furniture company. Of juggling plates and things like that. So, there's
very well censored there.
Yes, you like that one? Yes, you'd never guess who I was talking about there, would you?
Are they in the festival this year?
They certainly are.
Good heavens! And where are they? And where are they?
Well, they're on the Place Theatre with a two-hander, special two-hander. That's sweet because Sean Gandini actually was talking about how he started in Covent Garden, and they were saying, "Oh, how did you meet your partner Catty, who is Finnish?" And he said, "Oh, well, this woman just came up to him after one of his sets in the Covent Garden market." And sort of said, "Oh, could she show him some things?" And then she did some amazing things because she was a rhythmic gymnast.
Right.
And he said that they then proceeded to throw things at each other on a regular basis until they actually became a couple. So very romantic, sweet. Yeah.
You wonder what she did show him that first time.
Well, you do, don't you? I know.
Yeah. And I hope they got to a point where the throwing stopped.
Yes, I think so. It was a throwing in a good way. Yeah.
So we've just mentioned one of the acts that are going to be performing at this year's festival.
Yep.
And you were just talking about how you see 350 shows and you narrow them down.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about that process? Because these aren't just what our listeners might not realise. They're international acts. They're from all over the world.
They are.
So how on earth do you see them all?
Well, nowadays it's slightly easier because you can ask for videos and people send you a video link that you can watch online. So it means that our travel budget is quite limited, so we have to be very careful about where we invest that money. And it means that we can discover already whether it's full of text, how professional it is, and whether it's in the right kind of realm before we get on a train to go and see it. So we whittle it down, we talk to contacts, we've got companies whose work we follow, so we wait for them to have a new production. So there is a real sort of mix of people emailing us, people sending us random videos, people recommending stuff, fellow colleagues recommending stuff as well, isn't it?
Following the programmes of other theatres, mostly in Western Europe, really. There are certain theatres and festivals which promote similar work to that in which we're interested, so we see what they're doing. And the thing with video is it's incredibly important, but we wouldn't ever just take a show on the basis of a video, because that's a very dangerous thing to do, but at least you have an idea, or a strong idea, of whether this is worth, as Helen said, getting on a train or a plane to go and see, in order for us not to blow our entire budget. When you try and go to a festival where there might be 3 or 4 things you could see, or you go and see, you make sense of a travel plan. But it's fun. Well, it used to be fun, didn't it? Used to be fun.
Do you mean pre-Brexit? Pre-Brexit, it was more fun,
But you have to do these things very thoroughly. The only shows that we would promote or programme that we haven't seen are things that we commission ourselves. Yeah. We only do that from artists whose work we know very well. If occasionally something works out not quite as well as you'd hope, well, that's... you've created new work. That's a risk. But there's nothing so awful as taking something that you've just seen from a video, or that you haven't seen at all, but somebody recommended, and it turns out to be a complete turkey. Not that this has ever happened to us.
Well, there is one. I can think of one. There's an Italian company. We won't mention the name, but we saw a wonderful 10-minute video, didn't we? And we thought, this is fabulous. This is just what we're looking for. Unfortunately, the other 50 minutes were pretty dire, weren't they?
Yeah.
It's just head in hands moment.
That shouldn't happen. One should not do that sort
of. Well, that leads on to what I was going to ask, which was, what qualities then does a production have to ignite that interest in you, that makes you want to sit up and pay attention and want to develop it more and showcase it?
Well, look, the qualities that all performers need: presence.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Skill, originality, and all words like that. I mean, it's the same as people watching Britain's Got Talent. You're looking for the same things. So it's there's no secret or nothing special about that. But amazing how many people who are professional performers don't have it. But maybe they're good at other things. I don't know. But
I mean, I think sometimes you sit at the beginning of a show, the first few minutes, and you think, oh my God, this is wonderful. Please don't start speaking. And it's sort of almost like the tension in you, just for them just to keep the magic going, is intense, isn't it? And sometimes then it all goes downhill. They're not trained actors. If they start speaking, it's not good, either content-wise or the voice. So it really is just keeping that theatrical magic going. And because the minute that words come in, you come crashing down, because words are sort of so much more limiting. Whereas if it's something that's just expressed, visually, we've got to remember that 84%, our senses are sort of biased towards the eye if you're a sighted person. So something like 84% of everything comes through the eye. So if you imagine how powerful that is, you can tell so much through just watching something, body language, just the sort of the style, the lighting. It's incredibly powerful.
We had an architect actually on the podcast not long ago, and he's designed and refurbished and a lot of theatres. When we asked him what his favourite show he'd ever seen in a theatre that he'd worked with, he actually said Slava's Snow Show. And he said that it was something about the fact that it wasn't a spoken text that opened the space differently, and he saw the space. I think it was at Hackney Empire he was talking about that it made the space different, and it must have been maybe, it reminded me of that, a visual thing. He said that he saw the audience even in a different way because the show didn't contain much language. How much do you think space plays on when you're programming a show, maybe? Where does it go?
We look for shows. I think there are three main issues we've got. One is that it should be available, affordable, and stageable. Okay, so obviously we look. We know what venues we've got. We need shows that will be right in that particular venue. Now, Slava's Snow Show, which is a brilliant piece of theatre, and it works in most spaces, and it fills the space. I don't think there's any text in it, or there wasn't the last time I saw it. And it's really interesting. Clown, the word is almost worse than mime, isn't it? Or puppetry. I don't know why people are frightened of clowns. Or, clowns have just got a bad reputation. But there it is. There's Slava. He produces a whole universe of colour and emotion and feeling, and nobody leaves his show quite the same. They were a wonderful experience. And I could well imagine, I think the last time I saw it was at the South Bank Centre, which is the Queen Elizabeth Hall, a very big space to fill with balloons and God knows what else. And Hackney Empire, which is in any case, was a magical space. Now it's still a magical space, but it's much cleaner and nicer since it was redeveloped quite a long time ago. But yes, I could imagine whoever it was sitting there thinking, this is something extraordinary. And the only reason that we've never had Slava was probably because somebody else got there first.
Probably,
that was a very long time ago.
Yeah.
But there. Anyway,
well, I think the commercial potential for that show is much more than we can offer, and we don't do well with commercial shows, do we?
No.
Our audience likes to see something that's slightly more edgy.
That is absolutely true, isn't it? Yeah.
So what will they see this year then? What do we have?
Well, we're opening the festival on Monday the 16th of January at the Place with a wonderful two-hander, a pas de deux, for two guys. They are circus/dance performers, and this is a wonderful show where they look fairly similar looking at them on stage, similar height, but in fact one has got very long arms and the other one's got a very long neck. So there are all sorts of games that you can play with that little idea, and they they touch for the whole hour, don't they?
They do.
Somewhere. So it's a sort of combination of acro balance, very funny, very clever, very skilled, just a lovely piece of work. And we were so impressed with it, weren't we?
Yeah.
We thought this has got to open the festival.
As you can see, it's very hard to describe these sort of shows.
It is.
You have to see it to appreciate it. But a couple of other things. So there's Charlie and Stance, or Wilton's musical, a great, a destination in itself. And it's by a group called Told by an Idiot.
They call it a true fantasy.
It looks from the trailer, it's a silent movie come to life.
It is, with live music. So
it looks absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
Like I've never seen anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can imagine the atmosphere of Wilton's Music Hall is just the perfect venue for it. I don't think Chaplin actually ever performed there, but it certainly would have had things like that. So it's perfect venue.
Yeah. So that's at one end of our programming. Helen's already talked about Gandini juggling. It's actually this time we're celebrating with them an anniversary.
Yeah, it's 30 years.
So that's important. And what we've commissioned them to produce this lecture performance in which they explain the mysteries and magic of juggling. Another show
which isn't a dry concept.
No,
because if you say lecture, if anyone has ever heard Sean Gandini talking about anything, he's so enthusiastic and charming and funny. It's just a delight, isn't it, when Sean describes what they're doing and the patterns and what happens.
And I think it's important to say as well that the festival has a lot of education in it. There are a lot of workshops and classes that you can take. It's not just about the shows. When did that come in and how important was that to you?
Oh, it's been there a long time, the workshops. In fact, the workshops were there since, I think, the 80s. But they gradually expanded, and we asked someone one year, would you actually curate the workshops for us, because it's becoming such an important part of our programme? And they thought that was such a good idea, they went off and made something called the London International Workshop Festival. That was something, right? Damn. But no, it's really important really to share those skills and to bring young people, and all people, into the work, to get them enthused, to share just the skill sets really of these wonderful performers and teachers.
But it's a great opportunity because sadly I think it's the one time in the year when you can study all these different physical and visual theatre disciplines. It would be really nice if that were not the case.
Well, once upon a time you could study mime at the City Lit. They used to have evening classes and they had 2 year groups. There was year 1 and year 2, and you could study with Desmond Jones School of Mime. So there were these opportunities. I think Morley College also had them, but these are sort of few and far between now, as those opportunities for adult education shrank as the funding shrank, which is a real shame, isn't it? Because that was certainly a hotbed of talent sort of back in the late 70s, which is when the festival began. And I remember that being a very hot topic at the City Lit, about what people were going to go and see at the Mime Festival.
It's really sad if people want to learn some of these skills, they can only do it abroad. So we can only offer this at the same time, these workshops, to run concurrently as part of the festival. But that's just once a year in January. So there is the interest in the work. There is interest.
A lot of them are sold out.
Well, they are, that's right. There are very few places left indeed. The other thing that's nice is that after one of the performances for every company, there's an after-show discussion. And that's not sort of a formal occasion at all. It's quite informal, where the audience gets to ask the artists questions about their work, how they do what they do. So it's just a really lovely moment, isn't it? So we get a lot of colleges sort of to come and sort of get their students involved. So.
How consciously then does variety link into it for you guys? Because it sounds as though it's all based in that variety element.
It doesn't describe what we do, but we do sort of like to have a nod towards those sort of variety artists, largely through the film programme. So we have a silent film with the Barbican Cinema each year with live music. This year it's The Unknown, starring Man of 1,000 Faces, Lon Chaney. But in previous years we have had Chaplin, Jacques Tati, and we've also had, of course, the great Buster Keaton, who was absolutely a vaudeville artist.
These are people who use their skills to tell a story, not just standing there throwing balls in the air.
Absolutely,
And while we've touched on film as well, I'm right in thinking you actually have films that are available online this year as well. So if people are listening and they can't make it to London, they can still get involved in the festival that way.
They can, and we would urge them. There's one very special screening. It's a show called Marcel, which we presented in 2016 at the Shaw Theatre. And that's by 2 wonderful performers, Joss Halban and the late Marcello Magni.
Marcello and Joss were original members of a wonderful theatre company called Complicite, which lots of people will have heard of. And Marcello Magni, who's Italian but lives in London, marvellous classical actor and commedia dell'arte actor, and a wonderful person. And he died last year, ridiculously young. He was a great artist. We thought it would be a fitting tribute to show a really, really excellent recording of this performance that he gave here 8 years ago. So that's something not to be missed, and we're screening it throughout the festival.
So that will be, if people just go to our website, mimelondon.com, you'll find it as the second show in, and you just click on the link and it will be live and it's free to view. There's also another piece called Boys, which is a film of a show that we produced a few years ago at the South Bank Centre, 2020, and this is by the Pappy Show. So this is a film version based around the same idea of boys, young men of colour, and the issues that they face. So this is a joyous celebration.
What keeps you going for 47 years? Joseph, you've been... When did you come in, Helen?
Oh God, I came in... I'm the newcomer. I came in 1986.
So it's still quite a few years. What keeps you going year after year to do this?
Sort of a healthy breakfast and all that stuff. To be perfectly honest, we both had other jobs. We couldn't afford to do it as a full-time occupation. Helen has had lots of jobs at the same time as being the co-director of the festival, and I too. I've sort of been the director of various other festivals, and I've had an arts management company, and so, there is, to use your word again, there's been lots of variety, and the Mime Festival's been a very important part of a portmanteau career for us both. And the other reason is because we meet marvellous people. We're very lucky. I mean, I'd love to earn loads of money, or to have earned lots of money, but we've met wonderful people. They're people who create theatre, and that is endlessly interesting and stimulating. There have been some hideous people too, I would say, but I think we're very lucky that we just meet great people, and our job is to see shows, most of which are quite good.
I think over 47 years there have been very few people we were happy to wave goodbye to, it would be fair to say.
Yeah. But
I
those
think
we have been really happy to.
How about you, Helen?
I think it comes back to that word variety. So we are a very, very small team, and we appear to be bigger than we actually are. So it's the two of us throughout the year, and then we have some wonderful freelancers who come together year after year. I think we counted out, between the five of us, we had 160 years worth of Mime Festival experience. With this very small team, we just do lots of multitasking, and that keeps it interesting. So, on any given day, what I'll be doing is anything. It could range from, contracting to a bit of social media, to booking the hotel, to booking a bit of travel, to, looking to see where we might go and see a show next. I mean, all sorts of things. And I think that's also part of it, isn't it, Joseph? Because it's a small team, it's more than just a job. And if we were to hire other people to do those jobs, it would cost us a lot more money. So we've managed to keep it financially tight.
There is a reality. There is no point in doing a festival below a certain sort of scale. It's got to be big, or at least it's got to look big for anybody to take any notice of and come and buy a ticket. But that is becoming increasingly financially impossible. The arts are in a very bad state at the moment. There just isn't enough money, and I'm not, we're not crying poor here, but because we're not commercial. With the drying up of funding, it's very difficult to contemplate how one can continue doing this sort of thing. Not just us, but all sorts of exciting work around the country. Yeah. But anyway, that's a general picture.
We're not bashing the Arts Council, are we?
No,
I think it's sort of, government interference, the arm's length principle, which was always so wonderful and so valuable, seems to have disappeared.
But having done it for so long, have you faced this before and come through, or does this feel different now?
This feels very different because it comes on the top of already Brexit brought in new difficulties. Now the bureaucracy of having to apply for certificates of sponsorship for people from France and Belgium and all of these European countries, it just puts so much more bureaucracy. It costs more money. Carnets, the cost of freight, the cost of hotels, it's all skyrocketed. Plus, of course, the C word, COVID, that's made things very challenging. It's been a rocky few years, hasn't it?
It has.
But
if you've got something that people want to see, people are desperate to go to the theatre again after the lockdown.
Definitely.
But in general, the costs of putting on something are rising all the time. They're very, very expensive. And the other thing we've both noticed, but I'm not sure that for artists from abroad, coming to London is as important as it used to be.
Yeah.
We used to be able to say to people, if we really were struggling to meet even half the fee that they were expecting, look, come to London, you'll be reviewed by important newspapers, and with those reviews you can travel all over the place. It's very hard to get reviews now. The level of arts coverage in the media shrinks all the time, so we can't promise that sort of thing. So it just generally, it's more difficult, but one rises to meet those challenges. We will meet them bravely and happily wherever we can.
This drift, this cutting of arts coverage in the papers, it's really quite serious, because once upon a time you would try and send a journalist to see a wonderful show somewhere, and they would come back and they would write a piece of editorial, and it would be, the theatre would be full. It's very, very rare to be able to do that now. Really,
I think
that
when
coverage
we say, the shrinkage of arts coverage, but we mean for theatre, and we mean for non-mainstream, non-West End star theatre.
But I think there's been a real drift towards social media, but it does sometimes feel like you're just shouting into the wind a bit, certainly on something like Twitter. It's great if you've got a ticket release, for something that's been sold out, but otherwise it just feels like a little echo chamber. So,
I was actually going to bring up social media because I don't know whether either of you watch or use TikTok.
Yes.
But TikTok is a lot of visual comedy.
It is,
You don't watch it with the sound on. It's all funny, very short videos and a lot of very physical stuff, not necessarily done by artists.
Yeah.
A lot of it is people pretending they're, quote, normal people, but actually they're actors.
Yeah.
I just wondered what your take was on the popularity of that's really sprung up in the last couple of years.
I try not to be a TikTok addict. It's very bad sitting there on the iPad at night, just swiping through. I'm a sucker for all the funny animals myself. But yeah, totally. It lends itself so well, doesn't it, to a visual medium that's just that, that short, funny film.
Yeah, with no sound.
With no sound. Yeah, there you go. Back to the silent films.
Yeah. Interesting.
Maybe what goes around comes around.
Who are some of your favourite? And we usually say variety, but obviously that would encompass all of the acts that you've worked with over the years. Your favourite variety acts?
Tommy Cooper.
Oh, God, Tommy Cooper, yeah, great.
Because he's one of those very rare individuals who makes you laugh before he even opens his mouth. He comes on stage and you're laughing. And he was a magician, a very good one, and I used to like magic. But he was just a genuinely funny bloke. I used to love things like Round the Horn, the characters in that. I used to like Charlie Chest, all these things. These people probably don't mean anything anymore. But radio was a fantastic medium for comedy, not for Tommy Cooper, because he was entirely visual. But yeah, and I was very affected by those. Ted Ray, all those people, they all had a half-hour show at the weekend. Brilliant.
Well, those names definitely still mean something to us.
Yeah.
We appreciate those.
That's a great relief.
Well, you sort of, I would say people like Kenneth Williams, all of those carry-on films. There's a lot of comedy, there's a lot of clowning in that. But also, you think about Jennifer Sanders and Dawn French. They're clowns.
Yeah.
There's a lot of contemporary clowning, isn't there, on television?
These are actually life's observers, aren't they? I mean, Saunders and French, very clever. In a way, quite different from somebody like Tommy Cooper, whatever, but who comes, I think, from a tradition of real clowns, people like him or Les Dawson or something, and they were people who made people realise through their comedy, through what they said, that they weren't the only person who hated the mother-in-law or who felt uneasy in the company of certain people, or who had foibles, or I don't know, who couldn't perform in the bedroom or so. They made them realise that they weren't alone, and that's a very important function for a comedian, isn't it? Back in history, the court jester was the only person who could actually speak truth to power. He could tell the king, "You're ugly," or "Don't wear green, it doesn't suit you," or whatever. Very important function, and I think sort of the comedians I'm talking about fulfilled that.
So we've talked about a lot of theatres. What are some of your favourite theatres, either to visit, either to go and watch a show, to put on a show? What are some of your favourite venues?
Well, I would say the Theatre Royal Brighton. It's my home theatre, which I used to go to from being a very small child when I was sort of 7 years old. We would go every Friday night to see whatever was on, and saw some wonderful things. Ingrid Bergman, all sorts of people. Yeah, it was amazing. I remember a parental hand coming across my eyes to cover my sight when in Abelard and Heloise, and there's the nude scene. But yeah, that's just a wonderful theatre.
I think that's wonderful what you just said about that you went to see whatever was on.
Yeah,
because it's affordable, accessible, and you just could take a punt.
Yes, totally.
On what was on, which feels increasingly harder to do, as you were saying before.
Yeah. Well, and it's just that thing of whatever is on, you trust it, you go and see it. Yeah. And that's that, What about you, Joseph?
Some time ago, I was involved with a company which operated lots of regional theatres, and one that I really loved visiting was the White Rock in Hastings. And one of the reasons it's so marvellous is because, have you any idea how many seats the White Rock Theatre has got in Hastings?
Is it 1066?
Well, I was going to say you couldn't make it up, but you got it in one. And the telephone number was Hastings 1066.
Oh my gosh!
Anyway, I love going there. I was very fond of the very first theatre in which I appeared in, which was the Grand Theatre in Leeds. It was an ghastly but famous Victorian melodrama called The Bells. Anyway, that's neither.
The Bells?
You know what? Yes, The Bells. The Bells, I hear them. You'll see why my career didn't last long. Yes, and I come from Birmingham, proud provincial, and I used to go and see everything at the Birmingham Rep. And I remember Albert Finney. I was in the front row with my mother. I was only about 8. Anyway, and Albert Finney, it was Henry V, and he fell over my mother's legs. They were sort of sticking out in the front row.
Did she do that on purpose?
No, she didn't. She was completely mortified. Anyway, that was a wonderful theatre. It's gone now, but the new Birmingham Rep is a fantastic place. All theatres are exciting, even the ones that seem to have no atmosphere. The moment the lights go down, you're in a different world. They're all great places.
They are. It's obviously in my genes. My dad used to do the limes at Workington Opera House. Workington Opera House. Yes, it had one. Now don't not work. There's nothing wrong with Workington. I'm from Workington. So he absolutely worked with variety. So they would have variety and review, 2 different types of show. One toured, with the set acts, and it would tour around like that. And the other one would be a collection of different things that would come together just for that one particular night. And he's full of tales of, escaping tigers and, all sorts of wonderful things that went on backstage. So, yeah.
The Studio Theatre at the Royal Opera House, which is called the Linbury, is an absolutely beautiful place. I mean, it was very nice to start with, but then it was closed for about 2 years to be refashioned, remodeled. It's an extraordinary, beautiful space where, the moment you go into it, this is a theatre. The magic starts before the lights go down.
Indeed. Wilton's Music Hall, we talked about that. That's totally fabulous theatre, isn't it? And a little bit reminiscent of the Bouffe du Nord in Paris, which
is another glorious place.
If tomorrow you could wake up with any God-given talent and be any kind of variety or any kind of performer you could dream of being, what would you choose?
I'd be a comedian because I'm not very funny, but I would like to be. So,
I think we have to disagree.
I don't know about that.
No.
37 years later, I can tell you, he's a comedian.
No. I would like to be funny deliberately, not just because I choose the wrong words. But that, I think they're important people, and it's nice to make people laugh on a variety bill. It's brilliant, like Max Miller. I think he always topped the first half of the bill, so he could nip home and be in bed by 10 o'clock at night or something. Because I've got a bad habit about staying around late at night and often. So it'd be quite good to leave early. Anyway, that's what I'd like to be.
Yeah, I think I'd like to be a magician. Yeah, something just wonderful about being able to, either whether it's cards or whether it's pulling coins, I think that would be a fantastic. You would always be very popular at a dinner party, wouldn't you? If you would be able to do all of these little tricks and things. I think they're just marvellous skills to have. And I wish I could juggle. Sean Gandini keeps telling me he can teach me to juggle no problem in 5 minutes or something. But he hasn't seen how badly coordinated I am.
I'm sure he'll be brilliant. And if I can't be a comedian, or even if I could be a comedian, I'd also like to be a singer.
Oh, yeah.
Because when my voice broke, that was it.
Were you a singer before?
No.
You see what I mean about being a comedian?
Exactly.
The timing is perfect.
No, but when my voice broke, I knew there was no hope.
It's not going to happen.
No.
Well, I was at a cafe yesterday morning in Camden with my partner and my son, and I heard the voices on the next table talking about magic. They were magicians at the next table, and the guy was saying, he was explaining to his colleague, he was saying, this is a good trick because it gets the teenagers, he said, because the way teenagers aren't very interested, he said, this is, and I was trying really desperately not to just, not to completely butt in to their conversation, but I was trying to watch the trick. But there's something.
Did you notice your wallet was gone at the end of the
Do didn't know where I was. Woke up, didn't know where I was. But there's something so attractive about it, isn't it?
Yeah,
Because
totally.
A lot of people say magicians.
Magicians, yeah.
A lot of people say magicians. It comes up all the time. And yet it's not a very trendy art form at the moment. You know, we had like Dynamo, but that's about 10 years ago, isn't it? Really?
Yeah.
It's not very trendy, but it's definitely a loved art form.
Absolutely. And I think it's just the hours and hours that you've got to put in order to have the manual dexterity or to sort of work on sort of new tricks and that, you know, it's quite incredible. Yeah, what a discipline.
Can we ask you some quick fire questions?
Of course you can.
Would you rather go to a silent movie or a silent disco?
Silent movie.
Silent movie.
Stan Laurel or Charlie Chaplin?
Charlie Chaplin.
Yeah, Charlie Chaplin.
Go on,
Stan Laurel. He's Cumbrian. He's a Cumbrian lad. Yeah, no, Stan Laurel.
Would you rather run away with the circus or run away with the ballet?
Run away with the circus. Martin Burton, I hope you're hearing this.
Martin Burton, I hope you're not hearing it. No, run away with the circus. I mean, no contest.
Would you rather play the spoons or play the saw?
Or spoons.
I'd rather play football.
Would you rather attend a press night party or would you rather do a stage door sneak out?
Stage door sneak out.
Press party.
Oh, you party animal.
Yes.
Party animal. Yeah.
So you two can go home and
We'll
we'll
sneak
go out.
out.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why it worked, you see. We're
We'll
very
sneak
different.
out and watch Stan Laurel films.
Perfect. It's a date. Yeah.
And we'll go for a drink.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we can't wait to join you at the festival, and I'd love to join some classes, but they're all sold out. I've already tried. And those people that are not in London can join from wherever they are in the world by watching your movies, which is all on your website.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Maria.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
There we go. Weren't they fantastic? How incredible was that? And some of those productions sound amazing. I am so excited as well to get online and see some of the films. The magic of modern technology, eh?
Exactly. Well, look at us, sat here. You've got your Oodie on.
Exactly.
Tell
Well,
everybody
exactly.
what an Oodie is, because I didn't know.
Well, an Oodie's like a cross between a hoodie and a dressing gown. It's a very, very big, cozy hoodie, and it's freezing today outside, so I've got my Oodie on, and it's doing the trick.
You look so cozy and comfortable. I wish I had an Oodie.
In these times of rising living costs, an Oodie is the answer.
There you go. You heard it here first. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this week. And if you can get yourself down to the Mime Festival, please do, and tell us which productions you've seen, which classes you've participated in, which films you've watched. We would love to know and hear all your thoughts on everything mime.
Thank you to Helen, thank you to Joseph, thank you to Maria, and thank you to me. All that's left for us to say is...
See you next week.